Welcome to Heart Over Gold, the channel where love, kindness, and humanity shine brighter than any fortune. In today's story, Sarah thought her divorce marked a fresh start, until she discovered she was pregnant with Daniel's child. As old wounds reopened, a shocking revelation shattered everything, leaving Sarah to face a future filled with uncertainty and betrayal. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments, and keep up with our latest stories. The air was thick with the sound of her heart pounding as she sat in the sterile courtroom, her eyes locked on the divorce papers that lay before her. The ink, freshly signed, represented the end of her marriage, the end of a life she had fought so hard to build. The quiet murmur of the courtroom was deafening in her ears, but the pain in her chest drowned out all other noises. She had spent years in a toxic marriage, enduring his cold silences, his unspoken rage, and the slow erosion of love that had once been there. But today, as the gavel fell and the papers were finalized, she felt an odd sense of liberation. The shackles of her past had finally been removed. Her ex-husband, Daniel, sat across from her, his expression unreadable. He hadn't said a word. Since they had walked into the courtroom, his silence had become a weapon in their marriage. Just as it was now, she had prepared herself for this moment, knowing that it was the right choice, even though a part of her still clung to the memories of happier days. But as the judge gave the final ruling and they were dismissed, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Maybe it was the way Daniel had looked at her in those final moments, as though he was holding something back. Or maybe it was the strange, lingering sense of loss that she couldn't quite place. She stood up, trying to steady herself as the weight of the decision bore down on her. The reality of what she had just done felt surreal. Walking out of the courthouse, she felt a mixture of fear and relief. The kind that only comes when you've just turned your life upside down. It was then that the nausea hit. A wave of dizziness washed over her as she stumbled to her car, clutching the doorframe for support. The dry mouth, the dizziness, the odd sense of exhaustion. She had felt it for days, but she had brushed it off as stress. After all, divorce was a huge emotional and physical toll, wasn't it? But this was different. This felt wrong. Something deep inside her knew, in the pit of her stomach, that it wasn't just the stress. She gripped her phone with trembling hands and called her doctor's office, her voice shaking as she requested an appointment for later that day. The nurse, ever so calm, set her up for a visit, but she was only able to get an appointment for the evening. The whole day stretched before her like a long, unforgiving road. By the time she walked into the doctor's office, she was certain she knew what the problem was. Still, the test felt like a formality and official confirmation of what she had suspected but couldn't bear to admit. When the nurse returned, her face was unreadable, but there was something in her eyes, something that confirmed her worst fear. "You're pregnant," the nurse said softly, her voice carrying the weight of the words as if they were stones being dropped into a well. Her heart stopped. She had to sit down. She didn't hear much after that, just the blur of thoughts that rushed through her mind, the rush of emotions, and the overwhelming panic that followed. Pregnant with Daniel's child. She couldn't process it. It wasn't possible. Not today. Not after everything. Not after the divorce papers. She couldn't even bear to think about the implications of this, what it meant for her life, what it meant for the future, or how she would face Daniel with this news. But above all, the most gut-wrenching feeling was that, for the first time in years, she was bringing new life into a world where love had long since disappeared. As she left the doctor's office, she couldn't stop shaking. She barely remembered the drive home, her hands clutching the steering wheel in a vice grip. The world around her seemed to move in slow motion, as though reality itself was distorting. The realization was suffocating. This was not just the end of her marriage, but the beginning of something else, something that would tie her forever to a man she no longer loved. She had barely gotten home when her phone rang. It was Daniel. She hesitated before answering. After the divorce, after everything that had happened, she wasn't sure if she was ready to speak to him, but she didn't have a choice. "Hello," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sarah." Daniel's voice was flat, devoid of any emotion. "We need to talk about what," she replied, her stomach flipping at the sound of his voice. "I don't know. Something doesn't feel right," he said. "I don't know what it is, but I think we need to meet. I'm coming over." She felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She had no idea what to expect. The man who had once been her everything had now become a stranger, a man she feared, and a man she had no idea how to face after everything they had been through. But now she had one more piece of the puzzle, something that could change everything. The knock on the door came just as the sun began to set. Sarah opened it to find Daniel standing there, his eyes distant but searching. He hadn't changed. He still carried the same air of quiet intensity, But today, something in him was different. I couldn't stop thinking about you, he said softly. About us. I know things haven't been right, but I don't know. It feels like I need to say something, and I can't shake the feeling that you do too. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. The words she had been so sure of just hours ago of walking away now seemed fragile and uncertain. She had come so far, and yet now, standing before him, all of her doubts came rushing back. Daniel, she whispered, her voice breaking as the truth clawed its way to the surface. I'm pregnant. The silence that followed felt like an eternity. Daniel's eyes widened in disbelief, the shock flashing across his face before it settled into something colder, harder. The weight of her words pressed heavily between them, and for a moment neither of them moved. You're what? He whispered, his voice hoarse. I'm pregnant, she repeated, her voice barely audible now. The room seemed to spin. Daniel's face drained of color, his breath catching in his throat. His reaction was not what she had expected. It wasn't anger, it wasn't joy. It was something darker, something more complicated, something she couldn't understand. For the first time in years, she saw something raw in his eyes. This changes everything, he muttered, his words barely above a whisper, and just like that, everything did change. The anger that had once fueled their arguments dissolved, replaced by something else, something neither of them could quite grasp. The future, once so clear in Sarah's mind, had now turned into an uncharted path, one that was uncertain, frightening, and filled with questions. Could they really build something new from the ruins of their marriage? Could they ever truly be happy, or was the weight of the past too great to overcome? Sarah stood there, watching him, wondering if they would ever find peace in this new reality. Could they start fresh? Could they make this work? Or was the damage already too deep? And, as the night stretched on and the silence between them grew, Sarah realized that the journey ahead would be one of pain, discovery, and perhaps healing. But what would happen next? Could their fragile bond withstand the weight of this revelation? Would Daniel's reaction truly change everything, or would it push them even further apart? Add more to this story and continue the twists and turns as their path together unfolds, testing the limits of their love, their broken trust, and their chance at redemption. The silence between them lingered like a thick fog, suffocating and unrelenting. Sarah couldn't bring herself to look at Daniel, afraid of what she might see in his eyes. Was it regret, relief, anger, or was it a mix of everything? Daniel's gaze was fixed on her, his eyes darting from her face to the floor and back again. He seemed to be processing the news, trying to wrap his mind around it, but his face betrayed nothing. He looked lost in a sea of his own thoughts. Are you sure? He finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah nodded, unable to find the words. Her body felt numb, her mind still trying to comprehend what this meant for her, what it meant for them. She had imagined 100 scenarios of what their final conversation would be like, but never once had she pictured herself standing here, holding the weight of a secret that was no longer just hers. His child would bind them together. Forever. I don't know what to say, Daniel muttered, running a hand through his hair. His eyes were distant, as if searching for a way out, a way to make sense of it all. We were done, Sarah. We signed the papers. This wasn't supposed to happen. I didn't plan this, Sarah said, her voice trembling. I didn't expect it either. I didn't think that today would turn out like this. Daniel stood there, his face unreadable, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. The only sound in the room was the soft ticking of the clock on the wall, a reminder that time kept moving forward, regardless of how they felt. I don't know what I'm supposed to feel right now, he admitted, his voice cracking. I didn't think this was how it would end. And now everything's changed. But I don't know if it's too late for us, Sarah. His words hit her like a punch to the gut. Too late for them, too late for a family, was it? She had spent years trying to convince herself that this divorce was the right decision, that she was freeing herself from a marriage that had suffocated her. But now, with the reality of the pregnancy setting in, she couldn't help but question everything. The choices she had made, the life she had planned, the future she had thought she was stepping into. Daniel's voice broke through her thoughts. What do we do now? He asked, his eyes pleading for answers. What happens next? For a moment Sarah didn't know how to answer. How could she? She had no idea what the future held, and the weight of this unexpected revelation was too much to process in one moment. But she knew one thing: this was not something she could face alone. I don't know, she whispered, her hands trembling. I thought I did, but now, everything is different. Daniel stepped closer, his face softening for the first time in what felt like forever. We can figure this out, Sarah, we have to. She shook her head, the tears she had been holding back threatening to spill over. Can we? After everything, after what we've been through? I don't know, Daniel admitted, his voice thick with emotion. But maybe, maybe we could try. For the baby, for us. We can't just pretend it doesn't matter. Sarah wiped her eyes, her mind racing. She didn't know if she could trust him again. The years of silence, of hurt, had taken their toll. But she also didn't know if she could walk away from this new life growing inside her, this second chance that life had thrown her way, even if it wasn't planned. I never wanted this to happen, she said softly, but now that it has, I don't know what to do with it. What to do with you. Daniel took another step forward, reaching out for her hand. He held it gently, as if afraid that one wrong move might shatter the fragile connection that still existed between them. I don't want to lose you, Sarah. I don't want to lose what we had. Even if it's broken, I'll do whatever it takes. The sincerity in his voice hit her like a wave, crashing over her resolve. She had heard those words from him before, but now there was something different about them. He wasn't just talking about saving their marriage. He was talking about the future they could have together. The family they could build, despite the mistakes they had made. But the reality was that this wasn't just about them anymore. This was about a child, their child, who would grow up in a world of uncertainty and pain if they didn't figure out how to move forward together. I don't know if I can forgive you for everything, Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. But I don't know if I can do this on my own either. I'm scared, Daniel. I'm so scared. I know, he said, his voice thick with emotion. But we don't have to figure it out all at once. We can take it one step at a time. We have time. We can try. We can be there for the baby, for each other. Sarah closed her eyes, trying to hold back the flood of emotions threatening to overwhelm her. This wasn't the way she had imagined her life unfolding. This wasn't the future she had planned. But maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance for them, a chance to rebuild what had been broken. She opened her eyes, looking at Daniel, the man who had once been her everything, and the man who was now a stranger, a potential co-parent, a man she wasn't sure she could trust, but the father of her child. I don't know if I can trust you again, she said softly, but I'll try. For the baby, Daniel nodded, his eyes filled with a mix of hope and guilt. That's all I can ask for. As the night drew on, the two of them sat together in the quiet of the living room, unsure of what the future held, but clinging to the small sliver of hope that somehow they could make it work. The journey ahead would be difficult, filled with tears, apologies, and difficult conversations. But one thing was certain: they couldn't undo the past, but they could try to build something new, for the baby, for themselves. And maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to love. The days after that night blurred into each other, the heaviness of the situation weighing on Sarah's heart like a burden she couldn't shake. Each morning, she woke up with a tight knot in her chest, unsure of how to face the day, unsure of how to face Daniel. There were moments when she wanted to scream, to let all the hurt and confusion pour out of her, but each time she opened her mouth, the words seemed to escape her, trapped behind walls she had spent years building. Daniel had stayed in touch, checking in daily, his presence a constant reminder that her life had shifted into a new, uncertain chapter. He was trying, she could see that. He had been nothing but gentle with her, never pushing too hard, never demanding too much. But there was something else in his eyes now, a sense of vulnerability that hadn't been there before, a softness that made her wonder if he had finally understood the weight of the pain he had caused. But even in his efforts, Sarah couldn't ignore the deep ache inside her. He had hurt her in ways that were impossible to forget, and the distance between them wasn't just emotionally, it was physical. They hadn't slept in the same bed since the day the divorce was finalized. The emptiness of the house reflected the emptiness inside her. She hadn't been able to let go of the past, and the thought of bringing a child into this broken world seemed impossible. One evening, Sarah found herself sitting by the window watching the rain fall in heavy sheets. The sound of it was calming, almost therapeutic, as it hit the glass in rhythmic patterns. She tried to focus on the beauty of the storm, but her thoughts were clouded with everything that had happened. The divorce, the pregnancy, the uncertainty of the future. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. It was late, and she wasn't expecting anyone. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw Daniel standing on the other side, his expression uncertain but determined. "I thought I'd find you here," he said softly, his voice almost lost to the sound of the rain. "Can we talk?" Sarah's heart twisted in her chest. The last thing she wanted was to confront everything again, to face the reality of what had happened between them. But the look in Daniel's eyes, the way he stood there, vulnerable and pleading, broke something open inside her. She couldn't ignore it. She couldn't pretend it didn't matter. She nodded silently, stepping aside to let him in. They both stood there for a moment, the distance between them heavy, like an invisible wall that neither of them could break. "I don't know how to do this," Daniel whispered, his voice breaking. "I don't know how to fix everything I broke. But I'm trying, Sarah. I'm trying so hard. Please, please don't shut me out." Sarah's throat tightened, the pain threatening to suffocate her. She had always been the strong one, the one who carried the weight of the world without complaint. But now she felt small, vulnerable. The love she had once felt for Daniel seemed so distant, so unattainable. The idea of letting him back and trusting him again felt like stepping off a cliff. Blindfolded, hoping that something would catch her before she fell. "You broke me, Daniel," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You took everything from me, and I don't know if I can ever forgive you for that. I don't know if I can ever trust you again." The tears came then, unbidden, streaming down her face. As the floodgates opened, she hadn't allowed herself to cry in months, not since the divorce papers had been signed. But now, as the pain poured out of her, she realized how much she had been holding in, how much she had been trying to protect herself from feeling anything at all. Daniel stepped forward, his hands trembling as he reached for her, but Sarah pulled away, her breath catching in her throat. She didn't want his touch right now. She didn't want to feel anything other than the raw ache in her chest. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice cracking. "I'm so sorry. I wish I could take it all back, but I can't. All I can do is be here now, for you, for the baby. I'll do whatever it takes. Sarah, please, ... Don't shut me out." Sarah took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. The air between them felt thick, suffocating. She wanted to scream, to run, to escape from the world that had suddenly become too heavy to bear. But deep down, she knew something had shifted. This wasn't just about forgiveness. It wasn't just about rebuilding trust. It was about choosing the path forward, choosing the kind of future she wanted for herself and her child. She wiped her tears, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Could she let go of the past? Could she forgive Daniel, not for his mistakes, but for the man he could be, the man he wanted to be for their child? "I don't know if I'm ready," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can ever be ready." Daniel nodded, his eyes full of pain, but also full of something else, hope. "I know, but I'll wait. I'll wait as long as it takes. I'll prove to you that I can be the man you deserve, and I'll be the father our baby deserves, no matter how long it takes, Sarah." The silence between them stretched on, but this time, it felt different. There was no anger, no resentment. There was just an understanding and acknowledgement that neither of them could change the past, but they had the power to shape the future. Let out a shaky breath, her heart still heavy, but somehow lighter at the same time. She didn't know what the future held, and she didn't know if she could ever fully forgive Daniel for everything that had happened. But for the first time, in months, she felt a flicker of something, hope. Maybe, a flicker that maybe, just maybe, they could rebuild what they had lost. The rain outside had slowed to a gentle drizzle, the storm slowly passing. And as they stood there, in the quiet of the moment, it felt like the storm inside her had passed, too. For now, that was enough. As the weeks passed, Sarah found herself caught between two worlds. One was the familiar, broken world of her past with Daniel, the one where silence and distance had defined their relationship. The other was a world she hadn't expected, one where she was forced to reconcile the pain of their past with the hope that maybe, just maybe, they could build something new, something better. Every day felt like a balancing act, walking the tightrope between what had been and what could be. Daniel had been patient with her, giving her the space she needed but never leaving her side. It was almost as if he understood the depth of her struggle, as if he could feel the weight of the walls she had erected around her heart. But every time she allowed herself to look at him, to feel that tiny spark of the man she had once loved, her heart would flutter and then it would retreat, afraid to let herself fall back into the same pattern. Daniel's efforts were sincere. He showed up. He was there for her in every way. Emotionally, physically, he was everything she had asked him to be and more. Yet, there was something in Sarah's chest, a deep, gnawing ache that told her it wasn't enough. She wasn't ready to forgive him, not yet, maybe not ever. But as her pregnancy progressed, she began to feel something change inside her. The baby, the little life growing within her, was becoming the bridge between the past and the future. Every kick, every flutter reminded her that she was not alone in this journey. She had a responsibility not just to herself but to the child she carried, a child that, no matter the brokenness of her relationship with Daniel, deserved a future full of love and stability. One evening, Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, her hands resting on her growing belly. She had grown accustomed to the weight of it now, the way it shifted and moved, as though it was already making its presence known in the world. She smiled softly to herself, feeling the stirrings of life inside her. It was then that Daniel appeared in the doorway, his eyes soft, his face filled with something tender, something she hadn't seen in a long time. He stepped forward slowly, almost hesitantly, as if not wanting to intrude, yet unable to stay away. "I've been thinking," he said quietly, his voice steady but tinged with emotion, "about the baby, about us. And I know I've made a million mistakes, but I want to try for the sake of our family." Sarah's heart beat faster as she looked at him, his sincerity washing over her like a wave. She had heard these words before, but now they felt different. His actions matched his words. He was no longer just promising, he was showing up, day after day, in the small moments that mattered. The quiet kindness, the gentle touch, the willingness to be there for her in ways she never thought he could be. "I'm scared, Daniel," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Scared that I'll never be able to forgive you. Scared that the past will always haunt us. Scared that no matter how much we try, it won't be enough." Daniel walked over to her slowly, crouching down in front of her. He reached for her hand, holding it gently, his eyes filled with a vulnerability that cracked the walls around her heart just a little. "I'm scared too," he said quietly. "I'm scared that I've hurt you too much to fix it. But I want to try. And I'll keep trying, even if it takes a lifetime, because you and the baby are worth it. We're worth it." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she looked at him. This was the man she had once loved, the man who had made her believe in love, in the possibility of second chances. The man who had broken her, but who was now doing everything he could to prove he was worthy of her heart. "I don't know if I can trust you again," she whispered, the words heavy on her tongue. "But I want to, for our baby, for us." Daniel squeezed her hand, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. "Then we'll take it one step at a time. No rushing, no pretending. We'll rebuild, together. We'll figure it out." For the first time in a long time, Sarah felt the warmth of hope seep into her heart. It was fragile, like a flicker of light in the dark, but it was there. She didn't know what the future held, and she didn't know if she could ever fully forgive Daniel for everything that had happened, but she knew one thing: they couldn't move forward unless they took that first step. And right now, that step was enough. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing moment, Sarah and Daniel continued to navigate their new reality. It wasn't easy. There were days filled with tears, with long, painful conversations about their past, their mistakes, and the hurt that still lingered between them. But there were also moments of tenderness, moments where Sarah found herself letting down her guard, allowing herself to trust Daniel just a little more each day. She couldn't forget the past, and she couldn't erase the pain, but she could choose to move forward. She could choose to try. And as the months went on, the baby inside her grew, and with it, Sarah's sense of possibility. She began to see a future where they could be a family, where, even in the midst of all the uncertainty and fear, love could still find a way. One evening, as Sarah lay on the couch, her hand resting on her belly, Daniel sat beside her. He gently rubbed her back, his touch soothing, comforting. They were quiet for a while, simply existing in the same space, the weight of everything that had happened still hanging between them, but softened by the bond they were beginning to rebuild. "I don't know what's going to happen, Daniel," Sarah said softly, her voice full of vulnerability, "but I'm willing to try. For us, for the baby." Daniel's voice was filled with emotion as he replied, "We'll do it together, Sarah. Whatever comes, we'll face it together." And in that moment, as the world outside continued to turn and the future remained uncertain, they both held onto something fragile, yet real. Hope that, even after all they had been through, they could find their way back to each other, for their child, for their family, for love. As Sarah's due date neared, the unease in her chest had only grown stronger. The hope that had once bloomed in her heart was now tangled with fear. She had allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, their love could be enough to heal their wounds, that they could start over for the sake of their baby. Daniel had done everything right. He had been there for her, for the baby, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing, that something wasn't right. One evening, after dinner, she sat on the porch alone, staring out at the horizon. The night was quiet, save for the occasional rustling of leaves in the breeze. Her mind kept returning to the same thought. Was this truly the life she wanted? Was Daniel truly the man who could be the father her child deserved? Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft click of the door opening. Daniel appeared, his face somber, his footsteps slow. He had been distant lately, and Sarah noticed there was something in his eyes that wasn't there before. It wasn't guilt or shame, it was a coldness, a detachment that made her feel as if she was losing him all over again. "Hey," he said, his voice softer than usual. "Can we talk?" Sarah's heart fluttered. She could feel the weight of the moment, the impending shift in the air. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff, unsure whether to jump or pull back. "Of course," she replied, her voice steady but her insides churning. Daniel sat beside her, his hands clasped tightly. In his lap, the silence stretched between them, suffocating, as if both of them were waiting for the other to speak first. But Sarah knew, deep down, she could already feel the storm that was about to break. Daniel began, his voice thick with hesitation. "There's something I need to tell you." Sarah's heart skipped a beat, a chill creeping down her spine. "What is it?" He hesitated, taking a deep breath as if steeling himself for the words he knew he had to say. "I've been seeing someone else." The words hit her like a slap, the shock of them reverberating through her entire body. She blinked, unsure if she had heard him right, if this was some twisted joke. But the look in his eyes, guilt, fear, told her it wasn't. "You what?" Her voice broke, the sound of it harsh and foreign in her own ears. She pulled back, instinctively putting distance between them. Her mind was racing, trying to process the words, but they made no sense. "How long?" Daniel swallowed hard, his eyes downcast. "A few months before we started. Before you got pregnant. I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did. I have been torn, and I thought maybe I could make things work with her. But now, Sarah, I stopped." Sarah interjected, her voice sharp with disbelief and pain. "You're telling me that, while you were promising to rebuild our marriage, while we were supposed to be working on this, you were seeing someone else?" Daniel's face twisted in regret. "I never wanted to hurt you. I never meant for this to happen. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake. But I've been so lost, Sarah, and I thought I was doing the right thing." Sarah stood up suddenly, her knees weak, her stomach churning with nausea. Her mind was spinning, her thoughts scattered and fragmented. She couldn't breathe, she couldn't think. It felt like the ground had been pulled out from under her. She couldn't even form the words. The hurt, the betrayal, surged through her like a wave, crashing over every part of her being. She wanted to scream, to cry, but instead, she felt numb. The life she had imagined, this chance at healing, at rebuilding, was gone, shattered in an instant. "I'm sorry," Daniel said, his voice filled with despair, but it felt empty, like a hollow echo of what had once been. "I've messed up, I know I've ruined everything, but I'm willing to end it with her. I'm willing to do anything to fix this. Sarah, please." Sarah shook her head slowly, tears streaming down her face, her hands trembling. She didn't know what to feel, what to think. She had thought they were past the point of hurting each other. She had thought they were building something new, but this betrayal was too deep, too raw. She didn't know if she could ever recover from it. As the tears fell, the door creaked open again. Sarah turned, her breath catching as her eyes locked onto the person standing in the doorway. It was Hertha, a woman, the one Daniel had been seeing. "I'm sorry," the woman said, her voice soft but filled with regret. "I didn't want to cause more pain. I tried to stay away, but Daniel, he couldn't let go of the past. He couldn't let go of you, and I knew it. But I didn't want to be the one to destroy everything. Daniel's head snapped around, his face pale. "What are you doing here?" But the woman didn't back down. She stepped forward, her eyes flicking nervously to Sarah, then back to Daniel. "I'm pregnant, too." The words were like a knife to Sarah's chest. She froze, unable to process what she was hearing. Her heart raced, and the world seemed to tilt, spinning out of control. Daniel's face went white. "What? No, you— How?" "I didn't want to hurt anyone," the woman said, her voice shaking now. "But I'm pregnant, Daniel, and I didn't know what to do. I thought maybe you would choose me." Sarah's world shattered. In the space of a few heartbeats, everything she had believed about the future, about their family, about the hope she had clung to was ripped away. The betrayal was no longer just Daniel's affair. It was this woman, and the fact that she was carrying Daniel's child too. The weight of it all was too much to bear. Sarah stumbled backward, her breath coming in short gasps. She had never imagined that her life could unravel so quickly. She had been living a lie, believing in something that was never real. Daniel looked at her, his face twisted with shame and guilt. "Sarah, I know," she interrupted, her voice trembling with emotion. "No more. I can't do this anymore. I can't keep pretending that you're the man I thought you were." I can't do this for our child. I can't do this for me. The woman's eyes widened as Sarah turned and fled, the door slamming behind her, the sound echoing through the night as Sarah ran into the storm. The rain pouring down, the weight of her shattered dreams felt unbearable. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure: she could never go back to the man who had promised her everything and taken it all away. And so, Sarah's journey continued alone, for the first time in years, facing a future that was uncertain, painful, and full of new challenges. The twist of fate had stripped away everything she had believed, but it had also given her the freedom to choose her own path. She didn't know what was ahead, but she knew she would survive, for herself, for her child, for a future that was truly hers.